It was supposed to be the peaceful morning. As the sun filtered softly through the curtains, I held my newborn daughter close, feeling the warmth of her tiny body pressed against mine. The world outside our window was still quiet, just a typical Saturday in our small suburban neighborhood. But then, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. But when I opened the door, there she was, Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA. Her posture was rigid, her blonde hair tightly pulled back into a bun. Behind her, the other neighbors watched, as they always did, waiting for her to make her judgment. "Excuse me," she began, her voice too sharp for the morning calm. "Your yard, it's not up to the standards of the community. You're in violation of the rules." I stood there in disbelief. This wasn't the first time she'd come to criticize me, but this felt different. Her words weren't just criticisms. They were accusations, meant to wound. Before I could respond, she took a step closer. I instinctively cradled my baby tighter. My heart raced, and I felt a cold chill sweep over me as Karen's hand shot out, grabbing my baby. "Give her to me," she demanded. I froze. Her fingers dug into my skin as she yanked my daughter from my arms. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My voice came out in a strangled whisper. "Please stop. She's just a baby." But Karen's grip only tightened. It wasn't just a physical attack. It felt personal, violent, as though I were the one she had come to destroy. Just as I fought to regain control of the situation, I saw it, a glint of silver from her purse. The sound of something heavy hitting the ground echoed in the silence. Her badge, a symbol of power and authority, slipped out and fell to the floor. She froze. For the first time in our confrontation, Karen looked afraid. The power had shifted, and I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't the one in control anymore. And that was when I knew this was only the beginning. Where are you watching this from? Drop the name of your city in the comments. And if you want to see more amazing stories like this every day, make sure to hit that subscribe button and press the bell icon to get notified for all the updates. It all started 2 years ago when my family and I moved into this quiet, picturesque neighborhood. We had just welcomed our daughter, Lily, into the world, and we were looking for a place where we could finally settle down, a place that felt safe. The homes were charming, the streets neatly lined with trees, and everyone seemed to know everyone else. It was supposed to be our dream home. At first, I barely noticed the HOA. The rules seemed harmless. Keep the lawn tidy, no visible trash bins, the usual suburban stuff. I thought nothing of it until Karen, the president of the HOA, knocked on my door for the first time. Her visit was brief, but the seed of tension was planted. She didn't approve of the color of our front door. "Too bright," she said, her lips curling into a tight smile, as if she were offering a kind suggestion. I was taken aback. Who cared about a door color? But she was insistent, and the look in her eyes made it clear she wasn't about to let it go. We were new, and she had the power to make our lives difficult if we didn't follow her every demand. Over the next few months, it became clear that Karen wasn't just picky, she was controlling. Every minor infraction, whether it was a small twig on the sidewalk or a few days' delay in picking up the mail, was met with a letter from her. The neighbors whispered about her as she made rounds, wielding her authority like a weapon, reminding everyone who was in charge. I tried to ignore it. After all, my family was what mattered most, and the house was just a place. But the tension only grew, especially as Karen began showing up more frequently. Her visits always seemed timed just when we were about to have a peaceful day, and each time she pointed out something new. Our grass was too tall. The trash can was visible from the street. One day, she even suggested we repaint the fence to match the neighborhood standard. I didn't even know there was such a thing. But it was one incident that finally pushed me over the edge. One morning, I was walking Lily in her stroller, enjoying the fresh air, when Karen appeared out of nowhere, standing in the middle of the sidewalk like a barrier. She looked down at my daughter with her piercing, cold eyes. "That stroller," she said, voice like ice, "is in violation of the HOA's safety equipment regulations." I stared at her, my mind trying to process the absurdity of it. "What are you talking about?" I asked, voice shaking. "Your stroller is too wide for the sidewalk. It's against the rules." She crossed her arms, her lips curling into a thin line. If it's not fixed by the end of the week, we'll be reporting it to the authorities. I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter, disbelieving sound. You're reporting a stroller? Really? The anger bubbled up inside me, but I held it back, trying to keep my composure for Lily's sake. I'm not joking. If you don't follow the rules, there will be consequences, Karen snapped, turning on her heel and walking away. My hands trembled as I wheeled Lily back inside. That was when I realized that Karen's power was not just about the rules, it was about control. She had a hold on every aspect of life here, and she seemed to delight in reminding everyone of that. But I wasn't the type to roll over. I had fought for my family before, and I would do it again. But I never expected it would come to this. The next few weeks felt like walking on eggshells. Each day, I braced myself for the next confrontation, the next letter from Karen. The idea of moving crossed my mind more than once, but I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Then came the day of the garden party. It was a warm Saturday afternoon when Karen decided that the entire neighborhood would gather in the park for the HOA's annual garden contest. The theme was community unity, but it felt more like a spectacle for her to show off her control over the neighborhood. As usual, the event was designed to make everyone else feel small. I debated whether or not to go, but I figured it might give me an opportunity to speak to Karen privately, to tell her once and for all that I wasn't afraid of her. I should have known better. As I arrived, I saw her standing in the center of the crowd, barking orders at everyone. Her eyes locked onto mine as soon as I stepped onto the lawn. The smile on her face was anything but warm. "Good to see you finally joined us," she said, her tone dripping with passive-aggressive sweetness. "I've been wondering how long it would take for you to realize what you're up against." I didn't respond. I turned to walk away, but just as I did, I heard her voice again. "You know, some of the neighbors were talking," Karen called after me, her words laced with malice. "I'm afraid your house doesn't quite fit in with the rest of us. You may want to start making some changes." And that was it, the final straw. The gloves were off. The confrontation I had been dreading finally happened, and it came in a way I never expected. It was another Saturday, but this time the atmosphere was different. The tension that had been building between Karen and me was palpable. I knew that at some point she was going to push me too far, but nothing could have prepared me for the moment she snapped. Lily was just a few months old, her soft coos filling the room as I prepared to take her out for a walk. The sun was shining, and I could feel the warmth of the day against my skin, but I could already sense something heavy in the air. There was a discomfort that followed me whenever Karen was around, and today it felt worse than ever. As I stepped out the front door, I saw Karen. She was standing near the sidewalk, her arms crossed, her gaze already locked on me. "Nice to see you out today," she said with that same clipped tone, but there was something colder in her voice. "Your yard. Well, it's still in violation. I'll be sending a letter about it." I sighed, trying to ignore her. My arms were full, balancing Lily in the stroller, my mind on the peaceful walk ahead. "Karen, please, I don't have time for this. I've got a baby with me." But she didn't back down. Instead, she took a step forward, her high heels clicking menacingly on the pavement. "I don't think you understand how things work here. This isn't just a suggestion. You'll follow the rules or you'll face the consequences." I felt my pulse quicken, my hands tightening on the stroller. I could feel the heat rising in my chest. Was this really happening? Was she really standing there, lecturing me about my yard when I was just trying to take my baby out for a walk? "Karen, you need to leave," I said, my voice trembling but firm. But she wasn't going anywhere. "You think you can just ignore the rules, huh? This is a community, and we all have to follow them. You, more than anyone, should know that." Before I could respond, Karen reached out, her hands grabbing the edge of the stroller. "Let me see her," she said, her voice like ice. "Stop it, Karen," I shouted, stepping forward to pull the stroller back, but she was quicker. Her fingers dug into the fabric, and in one swift motion, she jerked the stroller away from me. "Give her to me," Karen demanded. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. What was she doing? She wasn't just talking about rules anymore. This was something more, something far more terrifying. The woman had crossed the line from petty HOA complaints to something much darker. Her face was set, determined. This wasn't about rules anymore, it was about power. I yanked the stroller back, But Karen's grip was relentless. "You don't know how to take care of her," she spat. "Let me handle this." The next moment was a blur. Everything felt like it was happening in slow motion, but in reality, it was a matter of seconds. Karen reached down and, with a force I never expected from her, grabbed my daughter from the stroller. "No!" I screamed, lunging forward, but it was too late. My newborn was in her arms, her tiny body held tightly by the woman who had no right to touch her. The sound of my heart breaking was deafening in my ears. My hands reached out, grabbing for my baby, but Karen held her too tightly. She was so calm, so unnervingly composed, as if she was in control of everything. "Karen!" I shouted again, desperation creeping into my voice as I fought to pull my daughter back. "Please! She's just a baby." But Karen didn't seem to care. Her eyes were cold, emotionless, as she held Lily away from me. "I'm just doing what's best," she said, her tone unnervingly calm. "You're not fit to raise her." Tears stung my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. Not now. Not when my baby was in her hands. In that moment, my body acted before my mind could fully catch up. My hand shot out, grabbing Karen's arm with all the force I could muster. But Karen wasn't done yet. She smirked, her grip tightening on Lily. "You think you can stop me? This is my neighborhood. You'll follow the rules, or I'll make sure you regret it," she said, her voice dark with malice. But then, just as I thought I had lost everything, a faint noise interrupted our struggle. Something metallic hit the ground. Karen froze, her eyes flicking to the small object now lying at her feet. Her purse had opened during the commotion, and her badge, her official HOA identification, had fallen out. I couldn't believe it. There it was, the symbol of her supposed authority, now lying useless at her feet. For the first time in this whole ordeal, Karen looked vulnerable. Her grip on Lily loosened, and I saw the fear flash in her eyes. I didn't waste a second. I yanked Lily back into my arms, holding her tight, my heart racing. Karen stood there, silent, her eyes still locked on the badge. For a moment, it felt like the world had stopped moving. The power had shifted. Karen wasn't in control anymore. "Get off my property, Karen," I said, my voice low and steady, as I clutched my baby close to my chest. She stood there for a long moment, her face twisted in a mix of rage and confusion. But then, without a word, she turned and walked away. And as she disappeared down the street, I realized that this was just the beginning. The battle was far from over, but I had won the first round. The next time we crossed paths, I wouldn't be the one backing down. The days that followed Karen's outburst were a blur of emotions. The neighborhood, which had always been peaceful, felt like a pressure cooker, simmering with tension. No one spoke to me directly, but I could feel the eyes of the neighbors on me as I walked past, whispering behind closed doors. They all knew what had happened, and while some looked on with sympathy, others, especially Karen's supporters, watched with judgment. The first few days after the incident, I stayed in. I didn't want to risk another confrontation, especially not with Lily so vulnerable. But as the silence stretched on, I started to feel the weight of what had happened. I could feel my heart beating hard every time I saw Karen's car parked near the end of the street. I knew she wasn't done with me. She wouldn't be. It wasn't until the third day that I received the letter. I was sitting at the kitchen table, nursing Lily, when I saw the envelope. It was thin, the paper crisp and formal. My stomach sank when I saw the HOA logo at the top. With trembling hands, I tore open the envelope, and the letter inside made my blood run cold. It was a formal notice of violation, detailing everything that Karen had claimed during our confrontation. The unsafe stroller, the unlawful behavior on my part, and the disruptive parenting that apparently had no place in the community. The final line, however, was the most chilling. This letter serves as a warning. Future violations will result in legal action, and further complaints will be escalated to the local authorities. It was a threat. It wasn't about rules or community standards. It was a message from Karen, showing me just how far she would go to assert her control. My breath caught in my throat. I had hoped, deep down, that maybe the whole thing would blow over, that Karen would just move on to her next target. But I knew better now. This wasn't just about petty rules. This was about her trying to break me. I sat there in the silence of my home, the weight of the letter pressing down on my chest, while Lily slept peacefully in her crib. I looked around at the home I had worked so hard to build for my family, and a surge of anger and determination rose within me. No, I wasn't going to let her win. For the next few days, I tried to gather my thoughts and plan my next steps. But it wasn't easy. Each time I went out, I could feel the eyes on me, could sense the judgment from the neighbors who now saw me as an outsider, someone who didn't belong. My hands shook with frustration as I fought to keep calm, especially when I saw Karen on her daily walks, her smug face always lurking just beyond the corner of my eye. I knew I needed help. That's when I decided to contact a lawyer. I needed someone who could fight back, someone who understood the power dynamics of HOA politics, and who wouldn't be intimidated by Karen's threats. After a tense conversation, my lawyer assured me that I had rights. Karen had no legal grounds for what she was doing. The violations she claimed were baseless, and her threats could be contested. But more than that, I needed to take back my life. I needed to fight for my daughter's safety and our place in this community. The thought of Karen continuing to hold power over us made me sick. The following week, I received a second letter from Karen. This time, it wasn't a violation notice. It was worse. It was a formal demand for an apology for disrupting her peaceful efforts to maintain the integrity of the neighborhood. It included a threat that I would be fined if I didn't comply. That was the final straw. With my lawyer's help, we sent a response. It was simple but direct. We made it clear that Karen's actions were not only legally indefensible, but that I would no longer tolerate her attempts to control my life. The letter demanded that she cease all further harassment, and I made it known that I would not hesitate to take legal action if needed. The day after we sent the letter, Karen's demeanor shifted. I saw her walking down the street, but this time she didn't make eye contact with me. She didn't stop or try to engage. Instead, she kept her head down, her posture rigid. It was the first time I had seen her show any sign of discomfort. It was small, but it was a victory. The power had shifted, even if just a little. The real test was yet to come. I knew Karen wouldn't back down easily, and the tension in the air was thicker than ever. But I also knew that I wasn't going to let her control me or my family any longer. We would fight for our peace. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't over yet, but I was ready for whatever came next. The days that followed Karen's silent retreat were oddly calm, but I could sense a storm brewing. She wasn't done. There was no way she would back down, not when her sense of control had been challenged. But there was something different in the way she carried herself now, an underlying tension that only made me more determined to expose her for what she truly was. It wasn't until a late afternoon when the breakthrough finally came. I had been poring over the legal documents, trying to build a case, when I received an unexpected visitor. It was one of the neighbors, a woman named Linda, who lived 2 doors down. She had always kept her distance, but today she walked straight to my door, her expression serious. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice low, almost as if she were afraid someone would hear. "It's about Karen." I didn't invite her in at first, but I couldn't deny the curiosity that piqued within me. "What about Karen?" Linda hesitated, glancing around before stepping closer. "I've been keeping an eye on her, and I overheard something I think you need to know." My heart skipped a beat. "What did you hear?" "She's not just some strict, power-hungry woman," Linda whispered, her eyes darting nervously. "Karen's got connections that go way beyond the HOA. She's using her position to cover up things she doesn't want anyone to know about. There's more to her than you think." I motioned for her to continue. "What are you talking about?" "Karen, well, she used to work for the city," Linda said, her voice trembling. "In law enforcement. I'm talking about real power. And she's been using that power, manipulating people to get what she wants. I don't think anyone really knows the whole truth." My mind raced. Could this be true? Karen's constant intimidation tactics, her ability to push and control, it all started to make sense. She wasn't just playing neighborhood politics. She was leveraging her past, her connections, to force people into submission. You're saying Karen's former badge, her position as HOA president, wasn't just about enforcing rules? I asked, trying to put the pieces together. Linda nodded. Exactly. I don't know all the details, but I overheard her on the phone a few times, talking to people in positions of authority. I think she might even be working with people who have been covering for her actions. This isn't just about controlling the neighborhood. It's about power. She wants everyone to fear her. I felt my stomach churn. This was worse than I had imagined. Karen wasn't just a petty HOA president. She was a woman who had used her power and position to manipulate and control, hiding behind the veil of authority. But now I had the information I needed to fight back, not just against her as a neighbor, but against the entire system she had built around her. I have to find out more, I said, my voice steely. I need to know what she's really been doing. Linda looked at me with concern. I don't want to get involved, but if you're going after her, just be careful. Karen is dangerous when she's cornered. That was all I needed to hear. I wasn't just going to sit back and let Karen destroy my life. I wasn't going to let her destroy my family. I had the truth now, an inside look into who Karen really was, and I was going to make sure the rest of the neighborhood knew it. The next day, I did some digging. I started researching Karen's background, digging into city records and local news articles. What I found was nothing short of shocking. Years ago, Karen had been involved in a legal battle, one that had been quietly swept under the rug. She had been part of a corruption scandal involving several high-ranking law enforcement officials. While she wasn't charged with anything directly, there was enough evidence to suggest she had been part of a larger cover-up. As I read through the documents, a wave of disbelief washed over me. Karen had been using her former connections to secure power, and her position in the HOA had only been the latest in a long line of manipulations. She was a woman who had built an empire on lies, threats, and intimidation. But now I had the proof. I had the ammunition I needed to take her down. That afternoon, I called my lawyer again, my heart pounding as I recounted everything I had discovered. We discussed the next steps, how to expose Karen for the fraud she was, how to make sure the truth came to light. But there was still one thing I needed to do. I needed to confront her directly. That evening, I sat down with Lily in my arms, the quiet hum of the house surrounding me as I prepared for the inevitable. The confrontation I had been avoiding was now unavoidable. The time had come to end Karen's reign of terror. The confrontation had been a long time coming, but now that it was here, I was ready. I had all the evidence, all the facts laid out in front of me. The hidden truth about Karen, about her manipulation, her abuse of power, and her blatant disregard for the law, was finally within my grasp. But more than that, I had the one thing she couldn't control, the love and protection I had for my daughter, my family, and myself. It was time to make her face the consequences of her actions. I didn't wait for Karen to come to me this time. I went to her. The next afternoon, I marched up to her house, my lawyer on speed dial, ready to pull the trigger if necessary. But this time, I wasn't afraid of her. I had the upper hand, and I wasn't going to let her intimidate me anymore. As I knocked on the door, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. For so long, I had felt powerless against her. But now I knew I was doing the right thing. This was about standing up for what was right, about showing my daughter that we don't bow down to bullies, no matter how powerful they think they are. Karen opened the door, her eyes widening when she saw me standing there, calm and resolute. Her expression quickly shifted from surprise to annoyance. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice sharp and condescending, as if she were still in control. "I want you to stop," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I want you to stop harassing me, stop trying to control my life, and stop using your position to intimidate others." She scoffed, tried to brush me off with a wave of her hand. "You think you can just waltz in here and tell me what to do? This is my neighborhood. You're nothing." But I wasn't backing down. "No, Karen, you don't get to make people feel small anymore. You don't get to tear down lives for your own gain." I stepped forward, pulling out the stack of documents I had gathered over the past few days, the evidence of her past, her manipulation, her corruption. I handed it to her without hesitation. "I've done my homework, Karen. I know what you've been hiding, and I'm not afraid to expose it." Her eyes flicked nervously to the papers in my hand. She reached out to grab them, but I pulled them back before she could get a hold of them. "This is the beginning of the end for you. You can't hide anymore." For the first time since I'd met her, Karen faltered. I could see the fear in her eyes, The realization that her reign of terror was crumbling. The badge she had clung to, the authority she'd used to control everyone, was nothing more than a symbol of her lies. It was all about to come crashing down. "Stop it," she muttered, her voice shaky now. "You don't know what you're doing." I shook my head. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing, Karen. I'm standing up for what's right. And I'm making sure everyone knows who you really are." Karen's face twisted in anger, her lips trembling as she tried to regain control of the situation. But I wasn't going to let her. I stood tall, my heart steady, as I looked her in the eye for the first time without fear. "You can't bully me anymore. You can't bully anyone here," I said, my voice clear and unwavering. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with years of pent-up resentment. I could see the defeat in Karen's posture. Her shoulders slumped as she realized the truth. Her power had always been based on fear, and now that fear had been shattered. For a moment, she stood there, speechless. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing at her doorstep with my head held high. The relief that washed over me in that moment was overwhelming. It felt as though a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, as if the years of torment and fear were finally behind me. But more than that, I felt proud. Proud of myself for standing up to her, proud of my family for supporting me, and most importantly, proud of the lesson I was able to pass on to my daughter, that we don't let bullies win. The next few days passed quietly. Karen never showed her face again, and the neighbors seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. The whispers that once followed me around began to quiet, replaced with a new understanding of who I really was, not a victim, but someone who had fought for justice and had won. As I held Lily in my arms that night, watching the stars twinkle outside our window, I knew we were finally free. We had taken back control of our lives, and nothing could take that away from us. We had fought for our peace, and we had won. And that, more than anything, was the greatest victory of all.